we have experts here, and you are experts as well, I'm sure, to discuss how we navigate AI and how we navigate the societal challenges. Before we start to talk about the challenges, let's do a stock-taking exercise. And I would like to ask you, Iryna, about the state of AI research in Europe.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, AI has three major ingredients. You need data, you need compute, and you need people with this expertise. I would say that Europe is doing very well on the last component. There's great human potential. We have a very high density network of excellent universities. We have many countries. We have very good training opportunities. As far as data and compute are concerned, it becomes much harder because there are a lot of legal restrictions, for example, on using training data. There are restrictive copyright laws. There are a lot of concerns, which are, of course, justified about the risks and the ethics. And because of this, basically, AI research in Europe is very much concerned with research aspects related to this. For example, there's a lot of research on efficiency of deep learning and large models, right? How can we create models that do not put very high computational requirements? And this is great, but I think it's an open secret that the music plays elsewhere as far as AI products are concerned, right? Because if you want to create a product, you need a very large team. You need a lot of money to pay these people because you need talent, right? And you need to do a continuous investment in this area, since it's not a one-time effort. You buy this hardware today, and in 2 years, you need to replace it with the latest technology. And in this sense, I think it's very hard to compete in the global competition against the US, against China, and other major stakeholders. For example, I have an affiliation with the new University of Artificial Intelligence in Abu Dhabi. The Arabic countries are entering this arena as new stakeholders, and they are doing a very heavy investment in this area. So I think Europe needs to work on these questions. So how can we build research infrastructure to support AI, which has become a major disruptive technology and a very, very competitive field in a global competition?
Well, thank you very much, Michael. In this OECD commission, you took a critical look at the German AI system. What's your take on that?
I think when we focus on Germany, what we see is that we're doing okay. I think I can mirror everything that was just said about the research situation. It's generally a very good one. Where we have deficits is translating that into commercial application. I think that is a big hurdle. It has a certain, that deficit has a certain tradition, I think, in Germany, in other areas as well. The key point, I think, is strategically AI policy in Germany, according to the report, should be oriented much more focused at the national level, specifically on data availability, on incentives for more compute. But I think it's important to keep in mind there's a public and there's a private aspect to that. And then also on the financing of startups, especially at the decisive growth phase into scaling up into larger corporations, where we have significant capital requirements that usually mean that many quite successful startups and also of the many new startups that have grown over the last 18 to 24 months seek financing from elsewhere, mainly the United States, when they want to grow. The answers to that, to the focus at the national level, then are also in leveraging much more sectors where we already have strength that can absorb artificial intelligence and create added value in already existing sectors. And the three that the OECD points out as particularly high added value potential are sustainability, including mobility, anything from energy production really to mobility. Healthcare and long-term care, because of a twin issue here, where we have on the one hand labor shortages, on the other hand starkly rising demand, and finally public administration, where we have a similar situation. And I think that that's been heard very clearly. I think we already saw some of the initiatives going in that direction now taking shape. What I find important is to keep in mind a lot, some of this can be done by the government nationally, some can't, and has to happen at the European level. I think harmonizing much better the digital single market is a key element, especially for the growth of new companies that have new business models and make new use of data and AI-based solutions, as well as the financing of those requires, of course, the finalization of the capital market union for real. So I think these are points to work on.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I said Michael is working in the heart of the storm, and so for that reason I cannot resist to just ask you whether the current crisis in the German government does have an effect on short, medium or long-term AI policy.
Yes, it does, of course. I mean, this perhaps requires some explanation because it's a very idiosyncratic system, and I don't know who's from Germany and who isn't here. But any legislation that isn't finished by the end of a legislative period is discontinued, which means needs to start from scratch again in the legislative period that follows, and that still concerns both implementation of EU law that I think especially in the area of the Data Act implementation and of course the AI Act will have significant repercussions simply because of the timelines that we now have to review. And bear with me, we have not yet done that in the last 24 hours finally, so I'm working on it. But definitely, yes, there will be an impact for sure. And then there's been well, let me say that we had a very concerted effort on reviewing the legal framework for data use in Germany. Some of the aspects of this package have been delivered. This is, for example, the health data use legislation. Others haven't, and they are also at risk. So research data legislation that's very close to our hearts, where we've really tried and pushed forward with ambition, I think is at high risk as well of being discontinued. And then we'll have to see to anchor that, of course, in the next legislative period. But that's, as a good civil servant, I can say that's a political decision then, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Sarah, when we talk about AI and when we talk about AI regulation, from an international angle, people very often say Europe is pretty much risk-oriented and doesn't see and take advantage of the opportunities. And especially when it comes to valorization of research results, as you said, Michael, we are falling behind. So from a science and technology studies perspective, do we make AI research on AI and AI in research too complicated? Or do we take a proper approach? What's your take?
I get a very complicated question. I guess the feedback loop between AI research and research on AI is very complex, becoming more complex. But I'd like maybe to bring a different angle than the valorization angle to that complex mix, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Because if you think about one of the strengths of the European AI research, I think we were just talking about this before we started. It is the, in principle, interdisciplinary approach. And through thinking about ethics and risks and government and kinds of governance frameworks and the issues with that, and that kind of interdisciplinarity is also at stake right now, I think. But it's one of the strengths of the European system. So that includes also social sciences and humanities research to reflect on the technical in relation to those social and societal questions. But also, if you think about research on AI, I think one of the interesting things is that, of course, AI in itself shapes research, changes the way we do knowledge production in very fundamental ways. And we really need to also, I think, invest more in that type of research, thinking about what the effects of that kind of fundamental shifts are. So in addition to the dimension of the market and kind of government logic, I think that kind of really intrinsic big shift in the way we do research and the kinds of knowledge that are being produced is a reason for increasing kind of that complexity.
So let's go a little bit deeper. What kind of new knowledge structure do we have to look forward to?
Well, for example, if you think about political science, they have new ways of doing. Well, it's very relevant right now, election time, but also Trump. So political scientists have all kinds of new ways of using AI to study voter behaviors, to also influence the thinking about voter behaviors, and also AI helps them develop new theories and new approaches. So that's in principle interesting and affects the knowledge production. But of course, we also know that literally these kinds of elements also shape the politics and the voter behavior themselves. Right. So that kind of complex space, I think we need to keep in mind. Also, of course, AI is technical, but it's also deeply social and social, scientific, and humanities.
Thank you very much. And Martin, we spoke when I introduced you. I spoke about the Data Sphere initiative, and the initiative deals with cross-border challenges of data governance. Can you say a few words about these challenges?
Yeah, happy to. And I pick up on what you actually were saying. It's really it's a social and it's a human challenge in many ways. Because when we talk about incentives to data sharing, at its core, it's a trust challenge. And the incentives, as of right now, are not really aligned for data sharing that enables true common good orientation of the digitization that we are currently confronted with. And just the session before, talking about open science, the whole question of open access, I mean, you have echoes of this everywhere. And I think at its core, it's a question of demystifying what data also is in many ways. Because, I mean, we hear this left and right, it's perceived as a panacea to everything, just like AI, Data is the new oil, it's the new gold. But if you put an S in front of oil, it's the new soil of many ways of maybe common good-oriented AI. And if we want to use the theme of the Falling Walls also conference here, it's also about breaking down these walls between those data silos that we have. And doing so is not just a technological question. It really is a trust-building exercise. It needs to be incentivized from a financial point of view. Regulation needs to be, of course, in play with all the standards that you set. But at its core, it's really about finding the, spot in between what we today perceive as very binary. Data is either completely open or it's proprietary and it's mine. I'm not going to share it with you. But today, we have a lot of opportunity through the catalyst of AI of actually going to this Goldilocks zone, of responsibly unlocking this value by leveraging new technology, polycentric governance, and playing to the strengths that we also have in Europe, which is our heterogeneity. And suddenly, we can be competitive. But in order to get there, we need to really think interdisciplinary. And that's a communication and translation challenge, I think.
And what needs to happen to make this suddenly, to transform that into a now? Because my impression is that we wait for the suddenly, the next change day by day by day. And if we look at the international development in AI, we see commercial drivers of artificial intelligence application that just go ahead. And as Iryna said, if you look at the research endeavor in other countries, they move with a rapid speed. How can we gain speed in Europe or in Germany?
I mean, just being courageous to experiment and dare to fail. I think at its core, it goes to those whole questions of Fehlerkultur in Germany and other places, not hiding behind procedure, but actually leveraging also mechanisms that already exist. I mean, when you are in data governance, one that is being leveraged more and more are cross-border data sandboxes, for example. It's not a place where you play with your child, but it's really a place where you sit down together with a smaller group of people, of the relevant stakeholders that also have a say, and you check out your comfort zones. What am I willing to share with you if you give something else back to me? And from the trust kind of recognition point of view, suddenly by sharing something of yourself towards the other side, you at least get a little bit of a shift towards somewhere. And using these strategically at levers, that we believe are currently blocking kind of a bigger kind of momentum, I think that's key number one. And the second one, and we shouldn't underestimate this, every time we talk about these topics, AI, interplay with the data question and the governance question, etc., what is the name of this project, at least out of a European point of view? What's the big storytelling narrative that we should tell ourselves to align? In the climate transformation, it's the 1.5-degree goal, which unfortunately, will probably pass. But what is it in responsible and common good-oriented digitization? I think we have some work to do there.
Do you have a proposal or a first hypothesis?
I think a hypothesis is that we build all of this on a stack in many ways, And I'm not referring to the India stack or digital public infrastructure, but we're building this on a common good infrastructure at a certain point that we need, as we need infrastructure in other areas of our lives, and there we can intrinsically put in standards. This needs to be funded not only by the market forces, but also by public initiatives. But I think that's one of those levers, and we need to give it a name, but there are interesting developments happening at the moment.
Thank you very much. If I sense the energy on this stage correctly, Iryna, you get extremely nervous. So if you listen to this now, listen to the dimension of societal challenges and AI for the common good, and you see the speed of development just in terms of technology, how would you evaluate this relationship or comment on it?
Yeah, so it's like shooting at the moving target. Basically, in every dual-use project, we have the benefits and the risks. And one big problem is that we can easily see the benefits of AI, but understanding the risks requires research work. So it's not that easy. Of course, there are some common risks, like biases, for example, which are widely recognized. But in principle, AI opens a lot of lines of attack that we do not even realize today. And this is what people actually do in cybersecurity, right? So they create such scenarios. This is a core part of their research. And then they try to design an attack and a defense against that attack. And the intersection of AI and cybersecurity is growing very fast, so it requires investment in these areas. So in my case, for example, around 10 researchers in my lab, though I'm a core natural language processing researcher, is funded by cybersecurity research. We had dual-use topic today, right? And my university has the civil
which of the three are you talking about?
Yeah.
The one in Darmstadt?
Yes,
okay.
The German one. So that's the main affiliation, right? But we have a big national cybersecurity research center, and they are funding a lot of security research relevant to AI, right? So that requires targeted investment, not only in like technology consequences and ethical aspects, but also in these more technical questions.
And Sarah proposed the collaboration between social scientists and engineers and data scientists. Do you have that kind of interaction in Darmstadt or in any of the other places?
Well, I used to have a lot of projects in this area before the AI hype. Since the AI hype has started, I'm so busy with the hype and the core questions and moving forward fast with the field that it becomes increasingly difficult to collaborate with other disciplines, since it's very demanding and it requires funding, which is extremely competitive, right? So it's much harder to apply successfully for funding in a collaborative project with humanities and social sciences than in cybersecurity, right? Because for cybersecurity, everybody can grasp. There's like a practical demand. We need to do something about this. In the other fields, it's hard to convince, and the competition is also, in my perception, much harder because there are more people willing to work on this.
Sarah, as a professional observer of the field, how do you are the social sciences left behind due to the speed of AI development?
Well, this is where I get very nervous indeed.
Bet.
Yeah, so indeed, interdisciplinarity is hard. Evaluating interdisciplinary proposals is hard. Competition in these fields is hard. I see this move to cybersecurity also at the European funding level, policy level. So I'm really it's very sad to hear that this is happening, although I can imagine on an individual level that that's what you do. But at a systems level, I think it's hugely problematic. Of course, yeah, I was going to say, but not, so that was before I heard this, I was going to say this might not be a competition, because the questions are slightly different. Your question was around, okay, you see this extreme competition globally. Should we get nervous about that? But questions around accountability, fairness, and equity, and what does the common good stand for? Who defines that? Is that a top-down definition, or is it like a technocratic way of looking at it? Or is it about who benefits, who's included in thinking about what type of research needs to be done, what kinds of questions matter? So the ethical questions around who benefits from AI. People have high expectations, better healthcare, better education, but they are also afraid for their jobs. They're also afraid of the kind of systemic biases. So that kind of thinking and research is a very different type of research. It shouldn't be in competition with this. We should have solid, kind of robust funding for that. And we might want to talk about the role funding agencies can play in that later on. But I'll stop here for now.
Okay. Martin, what kind of conditions do we have to arrange for in order to have AI develop in the public interest for a common good?
Yeah, that's also a big question, and not one that makes me squirm, but one where, I'm trying not to lose hope, to be honest with you, because there's unbelievable capacity, I think, if we look, for example, at the German social responsibility kind of area, the welfare system. A lot is also held up by civil society, by the communes, lots of, very decentralized initiatives. And a lot of efforts have been made in trying to actually leverage some of that technology there in order to channel it into a direction. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, where does the money come from for these types of solutions? Because they won't be developed by market players that, perfection their AI system for the data extraction and attention span economy. Henceforth, other systems are needed, and I think goes back again to the points that were made before. It's about educating also then those who are actually sitting at the sources of the support for these type of actors to actually sensitize them for the role that these actors also play in society, because our backbones of society, and those are the backbones, they've become digital. And they're the first ones feeling, the crunch of, no longer being able to recruit enough personnel. Henceforth, there's a big effort in trying to be more efficient by leveraging these types of tools, and there's a willingness to do so. But again, without losing hope, I think we have the ingredients there. We are missing, in some cases, the capacity and the competency, I think, at the funding sources to really see where need is currently the biggest, and then also try to, again, frame this within a narrative that actually gets the whole society along for that path. Because the use cases, and to finish up with that, in these areas of common good AI applications, people-centric, how can you make the daily lives of people better, they can make it very tangible why digitalization is not only the enemy. But again, you have to demystify what you're talking about. It's not the race for the biggest model. It might be a very specific algorithm for recommending, spots that are maybe left for those who need them most for your child, in the childcare, for example. These types of things, and I think using these story points is very important. Yeah.
Michael, can we have a best practice example from public administration? Would that be just a showcase on how to make data available, use them for the common good?
Yes, I mean, this is from my former job. I used to work in the Labor and Social Affairs Ministry, coordinating the German AI strategy from there. And one of the most interesting use cases we had are with an accident insurance part in Germany that focuses on construction. What most people don't know is about every 3 days somebody dies on a German construction site from an accident. Yeah, so this is actually still today the case. And the bottleneck in administration is that the people who are sent out to surveil and to recommend health and safety solutions to construction sites are lacking. So there's a staffing issue here, which means the persons that are there need to be used in the most efficient way. And we developed, and I would like to point out within less than 9 months from the very first idea to the actual rollout, an AI-based system, but it's actually not very fancy technology at all, that predicts a very simple predictive algorithm on the likelihood of an accident happening, and then directing people to actually check there. And this project had a cost of around 3.5 million euros to implement, and it yielded benefits already that are about 20 times that within a year. And I think that just shows how big the impact can be. And these benefits, of course, they're financially interesting, but mostly these are benefits that have accrued because we prevented somebody either dying or having a very severe accident that caused them a disability. So I think this stuff is happening. And I would like also to say this is happening a lot. There are more than 300 AI applications in the federal administration alone in Germany, and many of those are in the bigger parts of the administration, and the biggest parts are employment insurance, or pension insurance, accident insurance, those types of things. So there's a lot happening there that I think is really pushing the boundaries where you can use technology for the good. And again, it doesn't have to be the fanciest technology. We can make use of methods that are 5, 6, 7, 10 years old and still have a big gain there.
Since it's a game-changing technology, do we have to also reconsider the boundary between public and private types of financing? May it be possible to have private investors invest in applications in the public good, in the public interest?
I mean, that would be desirable when you talk about public-private collaborations that then are rolled out in a public service. I think we need to be very careful about what dependencies that creates in terms of skills. I think that's often forgotten that that may have a short-term benefit that's very clearly delineated, and then in the medium term, you have to wonder, how dependent do you become on your suppliers? I think that's not an easy line to walk, and when that is well managed, I think there can be something there. What I would find also quite interesting is like what you mentioned now, applications that are in the, let's say, para-public space, where you can say, how can we foster those? I think this is a very, very interesting case as well. Also, it's a really, really big market, and I think I mean, for all the understanding of, yes, we're looking for the common good here, I think we also shouldn't forget that there's a big demand there. From personal experience, I would also say the example you made with childcare, also goes hand in hand with very high willingness to pay and for better solutions, and has direct financial benefits for everyone involved as well that then translate from the individual to the economy as well. So I think maybe in those areas there would be something to be gained. Yes.
And we haven't even started to talk about the healthcare sector, amongst others. And having said that, I will turn to you in a couple of seconds, ask Sarah one more question, and then the floor is up to you. If you want to ask questions, get ready for it. Sarah, you wanted to open the debate about sources of financing, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this is your opportunity.
The easy stuff. Yeah, so I think there are multiple ways in which we can think about that. We had that dimension public-private. I won't go into that. That's a minefield. But I was just thinking about how can you think about more robust forms of funding and also the role research funders can play. So this is my bias because of my my field. So also public research funders. So I think, of course, by strategically prioritizing certain areas, and that happens a lot. Volkswagen does that with AI in the Future of Society. You have a beautiful program in the French National Research Agency called AI and Society. So those are fostering interdisciplinary collaboration about responsible AI developments. But also in their own practices. And I think their funders are really reflecting and reflexive in the way they introduce AI in their own mechanisms. So it's not only about strategically prioritizing areas, but also how do you responsibly use AI in your own systems, and how do you train researchers to do AI responsibly by asking for responsible AI statements when someone applies, and maybe also by indeed promoting open science and open access practices. So those kinds of ways are really, it's like something you can do immediately, but not all funders do that. And it has a huge effect on more responsible AI practices. So I wanted to get that in. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from your side? Yes, please. Susanne Beuter, just introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, Susanne Beuter. I'm the scientific director of the Research Center for Geosciences here in Potsdam. Many really interesting reflections, and I would like to link back to what was said in the beginning. To make AI work, you need the network, you need the talent, the data, the compute power, and the funding. So could I ask the panel to reflect upon the differences between the different continents? So I would say that in some countries we have much better financial possibilities for AI than in others. The global south, let's put it that way. So could the panel reflect upon how we collaborate together to make AI work for society and for science?
So there is a plea to broaden the perspective geographically and also think about the global south, think about indigenous knowledge as a different type of data source and data quality. Any comments from your side? Yes, please, Mark.
I mean, happy to jump in, and thank you for widening also the scope, because it's very Eurocentric, what we've been discussing here. But that's exactly, I think, also what this third way of, this digitization and AI transformation should be about. It is not about, the monolithic hyperscaling US model that we are all supposed to replicate, nor the, state-run monopolized kind of approach that we have in China. I'm really, really paraphrasing here. But at the same time, the question is, what do you offer? And if you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, or Latin America, where we've been running a lot of projects before I joined the foundation, I mean, the ability of actually then perceiving the data sets that are necessary for societal goods are so sophisticated in many ways, but there's such a lack of resources and also the feeling that one is alone within this, that it really just invites to solve a type of coordination failure that is taking place there. So I don't think it's only about, building capacity and competency, but it's actually going there and throwing a spotlight on what are fascinating hybrid approaches on regulation, public-private partnerships. I mean, mobile payments alone and, the way that certain things are being recommended in Sub-Saharan Africa are mind-boggling. There's so much to be learned from these areas, but I think we are really, really missing awareness of that, and also meaningful funding initiatives that unfortunately right now, when we look at developmental funding, are being reduced. And when other players are going in, not often with the most important common good, if we want to define from our Eurocentric perspective in mind.
Iryna, you're working amongst others in Abu Dhabi. Is that going to be a meeting place of different geographical hemispheres even?
Yeah, the faculty in Abu Dhabi is extremely international, so basically it's a good platform for collaboration with top researchers coming from all over the world. But of course, the product is Abu Dhabi-centric, right? So they are not serving the European market in a sense, because they focus on developing the best Arabic large language model. So this is their goal. That's why they attract the top researchers to help them build this expertise. So I find it very difficult to collaborate with researchers from other geographical continents on a larger scale. Of course, there are a lot of individual collaborations, but building such a product requires really a big and continuous stream of funding. So it's really a strategic and political decision to invest in such a project and do it over a long time. AI is very expensive. Just to give you some point of reference, I have been member of 2 consortia applying in a European Union call to build a European foundational model. So they will choose 2 projects. Each project is 25 million euro. It seems a lot. But actually for AI, it's not such a big sum of money. And they have received 27 proposals, right, from big teams. So it's very impressive. So there's obviously a very high demand, but the funding is comparatively low. So I think that without increasing the funding and streamlining the efforts, maybe within a dedicated institution, there are some discussions about European so-called AI Institute, it's very hard to compete on this level. So what is feasible is to define a complementary research agenda and collaborate with the stakeholders who deliver such projects.
Thank you very much. Yes, Sarah, please.
Oh, yeah. I would like to respond as well, if that's okay, from the perspective of maybe from open science again, because it's a very important point. So segueing into that through the work I was also involved in, a small part, on the UNESCO recommendation on open science. So that's also a global initiative. And that ties questions around infrastructure and inequity and inequalities in the system. But it also makes a connection, and that might be a new point to bring to the table for the discussion, the connection with the way research is being assessed and researchers are being assessed, and the ways in which we're also thinking about how change is needed there. That's not yet a global initiative, but it should be, I think, especially for this reason. So it would be very good. So we know the example of APCs. It's very difficult for parts of the world to pay APCs in the way that rich labs in Europe can do. In the same way, it would be very good if we use assessment systems that look at capabilities of teams and researchers in the way in which they're assessed vis-à-vis more affluent labs and countries. Thank you.
Martin?
Yeah, maybe one example that came to mind also, because of course from the science perspective, the academic kind of infrastructure that often exists also in the global north. One example that I came across that I found fascinating, it's a decentralized initiative that actually focuses on the fact that a lot of machine learning engineers are freelancers, because there's such a demand for this expertise that, you know, most of the time it's more beneficial for you to actually do it by yourself and then go to the big kind of markets where you can do this. And especially in under-schooled areas, you know, like India and the other examples, there is now a movement of a global network of, you know, these types of machine learning engineers. I think it's around 20,000. A lot of them are very junior because they want to build up their portfolio so that they actually become interesting. And the fascinating thing that the founder has done is he said, okay, you build the portfolio, but we focus our activities on common good AI solutions for international organizations, for example. Deforestation cases, cases in regards to supply chain, you know, cases in regards to actually providing education to areas where there aren't there, building this portfolio. Why is he doing it? Because he was a machine learning engineer at Google before, and he was flabbergasted by the lack of ethics, of, you know, a respect of the people-centric kind of approach that is there for different regions where these models will also be utilized. But just to say, there are informal mechanisms popping up, and they're completely bootstrapped. They never got funding, you know, which they should have, actually. But now there's complete independence, and, you know, it's a massive movement. So there are some of these examples popping up. And again, a thing or two to learn, even on the continent that we are at here right now, when we ask ourselves, like, where do we get all the talent to actually work on these things with excitement? And there are wonderful examples worldwide.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Yes, please. We need a microphone over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Wolfgang Stieler. I'm from the German edition of MIT Technology Review. And I recently thought about and wrote an article about the possible futures of AI, and I don't think it's worth just looking at the technical side. What's technical possible? You have to look at the circumstances of the the rules according to that game is played out. And as Iryna said, AI is very expensive. So we have had a lot of private capital powering into that technical development of especially of large language models and large multimodal models. And the people who spent that money want to see some revenue now. They are increasingly unhappy with the situation. And that means that the private industry with the large models have to create business cases out of that. Now, there are not so many business cases around that, except one, and that is defense industry. So we see, on the one hand, we have growing geopolitical tensions. On the other hand, we have what you call techno-nationalism, a growing tendency to renationalize
and
scientific
this leads to what question?
And that leads to a question: how do you agree with that vision, so to speak? That I think that it's not that it's nice to talk about AI for common good, but I see what I see in the future is an increasing weaponization of AI. So
right,
do you
so
agree with that?
There's a challenge here. So the only business case is defense, and defense is not public good. So is that the only AI future that you foresee here? Any comments on that, Michael?
Well, maybe I can reflect on that a little bit. I mean, one of my hats is also that I'm involved in an expert group at the OECD on AI futures. And I'd say that what's interesting is the group includes a very diverse set from academia, businesses, and civil society of, I think, some of the people who've actually invented what we call AI here mostly. And I would say that the discussion, where's the business case for large language models or foundation models, whatever you want to call that for the purpose of discussion here now, that is one that's very, very important, I think. Where will we actually monetize these? Because yes, a lot of money has gone into that, and at the same time, I think they've commodified very quickly, also through a very large open source community, which is a debate in itself, but nevertheless, I think that doesn't make it easier to create revenue streams. What I do think, though, is an important point that Martin also alluded to already is, right now what we see is, from a regulatory point of view, we're right now aiming at the end of the pipeline where some AI product hits a human interaction in some way. We've heard from your comment, I think also here on the panel already, I think time and again, and in other discussions, I would say at least a couple of question marks about whether frontier AI is shaping up in a way that we all find beneficial, because why are we all talking about so much about AI for the common good? Because clearly we see some gap there somehow. Everyone does that in their own way, and I don't want to speak for everyone, of course, but I do hear a theme. That's at least my impression. And I do think we need to be reflective a little bit that, of course, the frontier technologies that we have right now, they are reflective of the data and capital structures that we find in, I would call, oligopolistic online markets for e-commerce, for advertising based on social media and search, and for cloud services. What we see there, the reason I talk about data and capital structures there is we have players there that have access to very well usable data for the development of a certain type of artificial intelligence, and they can afford it because they extract oligopolistic rents from their clients to finance that. And then, of course, they develop ever larger models that require ever larger data sets, that require ever more compute, and all of those things are expensive. They are just barriers of entry as well for other market participants. And now we have this open source development happening here at the site. So I would challenge you back and say, like, let's see how that plays out over the next 12 to 18 months. And see which strategies will emerge out of this, because I think it's a very complex interaction of a very diverse set of actors going on right now. And I think from a regulatory point of view, in addition to data, compute, and skills, we should also talk about competition as an important factor in developing better AI.
Right. Talking about challenges, I have a final challenge for you. I need a 30-second answer to the question which walls have to fall in order to further promote AI for the common good. Let me repeat that so you can start to phrase your answer. What wall needs to fall, or which walls need to fall to further develop AI for the common good? Iryna, you heard the question twice. Do you have an answer?
The wall between AI and safety. Without safety, there's no common good.
All right.
Yes, I'll take that and add to that the walls between the different sector players involved in this, between the private sector, the public sector, and civil society.
Oh, you stole mine. Say that.
Martin, think about yours now. You're the fourth one. Sarah, do you have another one?
Well, I think I wanted to just echo the point you're probably also going to make. So how are we going to integrate public engagement really from bottom up through the initiatives, but also regulatory mechanisms, and also in the way in which we do research funding and research assessment, because we are not, in a long shot, participatory enough in that area.
All right. Martin?
Yeah, it brings me exactly to that point. The data wonk. I would have said originally, again, the silos between the data, the walls between the data silos, but I really resonate with this, and I think we need to break the walls in those areas that keep people from engaging in true multi-stakeholder debate and meaningful conversation on where we want to take this. Because it's a fascinating moment, it's a pivotal moment, but we haven't even talked about the energy intensity of some of those solutions if we go there. Yeah. And I mean, the calculation doesn't fit. So what's the alternative? Maybe that's our USP. Maybe that's the project that we're all hoping we can actually throw our minds and money behind. But we have to, again, frame it. And ideally with everybody, name it and frame it with everybody at the table.
So there are many topics to be discussed further, and you have an opportunity to do that. At 6 o'clock tonight, the AI night starts here at the Falling Walls Science House in Berlin. So you're all invited to join us for the AI night here. But before you do that, give a big hand of applause to this podium, which is excellent.